intense. Yeah, just took a photo. Took 2 photos, actually. Cool, so we swing that around. Should get in your face.
Cool.
Yeah.
Check.
That's right, it's in.
Yeah, one time for your mind.
Do you freestyle?
Oh, I write a bit of poetry, you know.
Yeah. Oh, but so Alexy, is that right?
Alexy, that's right. Rolling Russia.
Yeah, well, nice. So I was cruising through Instagram locations, Tokoroa. I was like, who's about? I came up with yourself and Brooke. And I think it was like a photo that Brooke had taken, your girlfriend, of a girl that used to run the maybe like Anytime Fitness or something in Cambridge. Mm-hmm. And I was like, there's that person as well.
Yeah. Small country, man.
Oh, New Zealand,
everybody.
Yeah, like you said that you moved to me on social media, that you moved to New Zealand in 2002. Whereabouts in Russia did you come from, and what was it like?
Well, I'm from the Far East, so I'm from Vladivostok. It's way over by Japan. So, you know, like I'm closer to Japan and Korea and China, and, you know, Moscow is on the other side of the world as far as I'm concerned. I've never been there, you know. Yeah. So the Russia that everybody knows, I've never actually seen. Yeah. So St. Petersburg, Moscow, I don't know none of that. Yeah, it's like a 9-hour flight. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So what goes down in Vladivostok?
It's a port, kind of like, you know, we have Tauranga over here. So, you know, we're the major eastern port. Yeah, like all the Asian cars, like Japanese cars especially, it's a big thing there. That's what it's dominated by. It's cars and, you know, freight. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it does have its own flavor. Kind of in that respect to the rest of Russia, especially when it comes to crime.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it has its very own criminal flavor. Yeah.
Like what?
Well, you know, you see all these, you know, all the movies with all the, you know, Russian mafia type stuff, all the tattoos and stuff. That kind of stuff doesn't actually fly there as much. Yeah, it kind of has its own thing. Like, yeah, a lot of it. There was a lot going on in the 90s where obviously Russia stopped being communist, and a lot of these massive enterprises like the port itself, which used to be owned by the government, was up for grabs, so it could be privatized. And there was a lot of fighting over that. You know, a lot of people got killed over these things. The 90s were wild. And that's, you know, that was my childhood. You know, essentially, you know, I grew up there in the 90s, and yeah, like it was really intense. But it from what I heard, everybody's always been saying that whatever structures there were outside of our city, they couldn't quite take off in the city because it was just too much of a gold mine for someone to come in and take over. So yeah.
So I suppose it's like the whole gig is being run by the government in the little handouts from the government, and then it's like you try to go to a privatized system and try float tenders, and the ones that have been getting the deal all this time are going, hey, we want to keep getting the deal.
Exactly, and you know, it's kind of like a shock to the system for a lot of people when everything is owned by the government and suddenly it's this big lolly scramble and everybody gets a piece of it. You know, everybody gets like, you know, some sort of stock. Yeah. But at the time when nobody's got money, you know, you can really lowball them and buy their stock off them. So suddenly, you know, that's how you have all these Russian billionaires. You know, every time you see it in Auckland, every time some, like, I don't know how many feet the yacht usually is, like 40 feet yacht, I don't know, some super yacht comes in, it'll be owned by some Russian billionaire. You know, and in Russia, all these billionaires are first generation. You know, like this is none of it is old money. There was no money before that. Yeah, you know, like when it's communism, everybody's equal. So you know,
just some more equal, isn't that the saying?
Yeah, well, you know how it goes. It's like you know, in Russia, like in communist Russia, everything is free, but it's all shit. Yeah, yeah, and then you know, suddenly it kind of got consolidated in a few hands, and that's how you have these mega rich guys, because it took over those enterprises, all the metals, all the freight in my city, that kind of stuff. All the natural resources got consolidated in a few hands. So those guys became mega rich just over a few years. Yeah.
And so, like, do you know much about like when it was communist? Like, what was sort of the dirty dealings and crimes and sort of ways of getting around everything's free but it's shit?
Yeah, no, there definitely was, and that's kind of where the origins of the Russian mafia lie. Like the whole, what you see in the movies.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously it's kind of developed over the 90s as well, but back then, they were called the thieves. They were called the thieves because it wasn't necessarily because they were actual thieves, but it was kind of like a government term for them, where if you're a criminal, that means you're a thief from the state, from us, from the people. You're a thief. You're a bad guy, and they kind of embraced that. They said, okay, cool. That's what we are. Then that's we're going to be known as that. But a lot of that crime was, in fact, actually, people stealing shit. It'll be just kind of bank robberies, shop robberies, breaking into houses, essentially, stuff like that. And people were very skilled at these things, proper heist men. But there wasn't much of the traditional, mafia crime, so to speak. There wasn't an awful lot of standovers because it was still, it's state property. You're not going to stand over the state. You're not standing over somebody's business because there is no private business. Yeah. So the likes of protection rackets and all of that you see in the US in the Prohibition era, they didn't come to Russia until the 90s.
Right.
Yeah. So that was our Prohibition era.
Yeah. And so, as a port town, was there anything coming in?
Oh, everything was coming in. Cars were a massive thing. Obviously, where there's cars, there's a hustle. There's all sorts of hustle. There's, obviously, car parts. There was a lot of auto thefts. There's a pretty full-on underground racing scene as well. Kind of like Need for Speed Underground type stuff. It actually goes off, and it's those kind of cars as well.
Yeah.
So people modify them, build them that way.
And they weren't supposed to own those?
Well, in the 90s, that became acceptable, but then towards the late 80s, when you had the reformed economy, it wasn't, you weren't necessarily meant to be having those. It was just kind of, it was people sensing the end of an era, and they're just like, hey, at least we'll be first on the scene. It's not legal yet, but...
And were they kind of like, we're far enough away from Moscow, we could probably get started right now?
In a sense, because it's kind of like, well, hey, if we get the local law enforcement on board, unless someone's going to come and come and look, we're not going to have any problems. And at the time, nobody was going to come and look because they had their own problems over there. So, yeah.
So, like, law enforcement growing up, was it a police officer, or was it more of a military personnel type thing?
Well, it's interesting you say that because right up until, it was actually recent, I already left Russia by then, but the police was called the militia. It's, like they look like policemen, they had the uniforms and everything like that, but they were called militia right up until the mid-2000s from what I remember. But as far as function goes, it was essentially the same as police.
Right. So what age did you leave?
I would have been 11 at the time.
11. Yeah. Right. So you were pretty much finished primary schooling, and you came to New Zealand for more like secondary education, right?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, I kind of like, I had to finish the last year in primary school because of it was something about my birth month where I wouldn't fit into the criteria to go straight into intermediate. So yeah.
Oh wow! And so did you pick up some mates at that last month?
Nah, not really, man. It was, it was a bit of a culture shock, really.
Yeah.
Like it's very different. Like the two countries are very different. Like one thing that I've noticed is, like at their root, the people are the same everywhere, but culture, that's a whole different thing. But I feel that's why I see culture as something separate, to what a human is in essence. Yeah.
Hardcore. Everyone's the same but culturally different.
Yeah, and and at the same time, you also kind of look back on it, and culture changes.
Yeah.
Culture has a tendency to change. Like even the Russian culture is not the same as it was back then. Because I've been back since.
Right.
I've been back quite a lot, and actually in recent times, and I've gone back and I've seen my friends I grew up with. They all have families now, and it's different.
Yeah.
You still have like those little remnants from from that time. You kind of have the certain people in the power structure that kind of still maintain a certain status quo. But aside from that, it's bound to change. Just as New Zealand has changed since I first got here.
Yeah. So how do socioeconomically, how does it feel living in New Zealand and what we're going through, and then going back to 30 years Russia?
Well, look, I mean, I suppose it's all about where you are. I know a lot of people like to compare these things in terms of like, oh well, check out the perspective because we have it this good. Think of the people over there.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're over there, it doesn't feel that way. When you're over here and you said, well, you could have less like them.
Mm-hmm.
And you feel like, oh man, yeah, that would suck. So, I should be grateful for what I got. But when you're over there, like you see the things that people have over here, and they're like, okay, cool, yeah, nah, it's nice, but I can deal with this. It's just is what it is when you're in the midst of it. It's more the ideas that kind of really spook people more than anything else.
Yeah,
yeah.
So to you, does Russia feel like a young country, or is it, or it's like Russia, USSR, all feel like all-encompassing when you're still in the actual Russia part?
A bit of both. I mean, there's obviously a lot of the culture has not disappeared. You even still have all these communist era statues. They're still around. Nobody's pulled them down. Some people get really into it, like, oh, finally revolution, overthrow, full change. Whereas in Russia, it's kind of like, okay, cool, we've changed our political and economic system, but we haven't really changed the culture so much because it was never an issue for everyone to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in that sense, it's interesting because Russia has very deep roots in terms of has a very rich history going to even well before the communist era. The Tsars and all of that, and all the emperors and whatnot. Ivan the Terrible and whatnot. So it has a rich history, but I think at this stage it's kind of like an amalgamation of everything at once. Obviously, it's not without its pressure from the government itself. Like Vladimir puts effort in. He still calls the shots.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in that respect, it doesn't really feel like a young country in that sense. It's its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then, so for you, you're closer to Asia than you are to St. Petersburg or Moscow. Was there any influence in that? Like,
most definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
People even notice that within Russia. When people from my part go to the other side, they always say, "Man, you guys even talk faster. Like, everything is, you're always on the go. Everything's a big hustle for you." But yeah, I mean, like we have our own kind of rhythm of life, and we do have a lot of Asian influence on the culture, on the food even, like there's growing up, like when I go to like Asian grocery shops in New Zealand, I see a lot of things that that were normal to me growing up. It wasn't something exotic that I had to go to a special shop for. But yeah, like even products like that, there's a lot of, Korean, Chinese, Japanese products that they were just kind of like in every supermarket. Mm-hmm. It's normal food, yeah. But yeah, like in that respect, again, it's, when you compare the European part of Russia to the Asian part, we are a little bit behind in terms of the infrastructure and certain events. But but I suppose it's no different to say Auckland versus Tokoroa. You don't get all the same things here, but the upside is, Auckland's 3 hours away, whereas, Moscow's a 9-hour flight. Yeah. So, in that sense, there is a little bit of that, and there is a little bit of, sometimes a little bit of complaining from the people in that part of Russia saying, look, you guys are way too far away to be in touch with what's going on here. And sometimes it makes you think, like, at which point will this kind of break away? It's kind of a worry, and who knows, in my lifetime or not.
Yeah. So you said, like, Vladimir kind of still controls the place. Like, is there some sort of local government trying to be revolutionary, or no? They're very much part of Russia in terms of a parliament or government locally.
What's interesting about the Russian power structure is today's politicians are my childhood's top gangsters, and I'm not like this isn't a joke either. This is these are guys that have gone from being known for shooting people up, and to being the governor, to being the mayor. And what's even more funny is these guys still end up in prison today. Like. It's an interesting system where they almost pick people that had almost some sort of social authority as a crime figure, as opposed to some guy that just decided to kind of campaign and be chosen by the people. They said, hey, we'll go with this guy, he's already got a rep. People are gonna listen. So yeah, they kind of they pull him over to Moscow, they kind of get him down with the program, say, hey, this is what's going down. And the first few times it didn't work out, because they said, hey, okay, cool, well, yeah, I'm down with the program. But then when you go back, you're like, okay, cool, well, these guys are too far away. I'm the king of this castle. They're too far away to tell me anything. And they made it, they made a point very quickly to show them, no matter how far away we are, we're still in control.
We know what you're doing, mate.
Yeah. 16 years for bribery.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So, like, these guys send the message and they still do it. They never hesitate to. Just a couple days ago, some guy, I think he was in charge of what could be considered as like imagine Kiwi Rail. Yeah. Yeah. So the head guy of Kiwi Rail. Yeah. He ended up with 7.5 years for bribery. And this is today. Yeah.
What was he getting away with?
We're not exactly sure. Like the thing is, we realize that more often than not, these things are politically motivated. So it's not like they have to work very hard to prove anything. It's not like he's going to be like, nah, I'm innocent and proven guilty. It's kind of more the other way around. But chances are he probably did take bribes. That's the thing. But yeah, the fact that they kind of decided to go after him means he probably didn't get with the program. But as far as the bribes themselves win, it's it could be anything. It could be pocketing taxes for any like freight that comes through, like a lot of the freight trains, stuff like that. So yeah, and there's a lot of money in that. So when we're talking bribes, we're talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. Yeah,
he wants that big yacht and parked up in Auckland.
There you go. Yeah.
the motivation's there for some people. Yeah. So like you said, when you came to New Zealand, it was a real culture shock. How did you, I guess the word's assimilate, but what did it look like? Like your family must have been hugely important.
Well, yeah, it was a very interesting time because I grew up in the streets in Russia, and and that's not uncommon. It's not to say that I was this street kid while everybody else wasn't. Like it's a lot more social. You don't at the time you don't spend a lot of time at home when you're a kid. You go outside, you come down a couple of floors.
It was the 90s for any millennial out there.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there was before the all the social media, PlayStations, etc.
Yeah.
But yeah, you used to come down a couple floors, get one of your boys, come down another couple.
So you're in like a big building or something.
Yeah. So like big. Like I grew up in the housing project, so there were like 16 stories. We called them the Twin Towers of Doom because essentially there were 2 towers just like that. But yeah, like you're always outside doing what you do, and even if you don't get any of your boys on the way down, you still come outside, there'll be somebody there.
Yeah.
You know, you're just going to be like, hey, you know what, I'm going to go outside. There's going to be something for me to do. Over here, I went outside and there was nothing.
So, like, what was to do?
Anything, you know, you just hang out, you know, like your kids, you're playing, you'll go break some shit, you'll go light a fire, whatever, you know. Like
sports or no?
Yeah, you could go down to the school, you know, play some soccer, play some basketball, you know, there was always something. Whatever kids like to do is just, you know, let them out, they'll figure something out.
Yeah.
You know, when there's winter, especially, you know, like there's snow, you know, like you build all these big ramps and everything, like the whole neighborhood come together, and it's just, you know, everybody's there from, you know, there'll be like 50 people there at once.
Are you making the most of snow, or it's just playing with snow? You're not like skating or snowboarding or towing people around on stuff?
Yeah. No, I mean, like, obviously it wasn't anything, you know, like snowboarding or anything that's quite professional, and you need some sort of equipment, you know.
Yeah.
So, but like, yeah, you know, you kind of improvise something. We used to take like car bumpers and make little like things out of them, you know, like little bobsleigh team over there. Yeah. But yeah, like that's what you did. And then over here, it's kind of like you go outside and there's nothing there.
Yeah.
A couple of cars go by, you know, you just don't see people in the street. So I think to myself, like, you know, like, what do people do?
What part of Auckland were you in?
I was in central Auckland, Onehunga.
Yeah.
So I grew up there, like right through till I finished school.
Yeah.
So that was kind of it. I was like, okay, cool. What do? I had a little push scooter. I kind of, you know, scooted around the entire neighborhood, and I was like, where is everyone?
End up at the Royal Light Mall and go, oh, hey.
pretty much, yeah. Like, I used to go there quite a lot and just look at shit. Like, let's go to Woodcoll's, let's see what DVDs they have. I got nothing else to do. Yeah.
No, I lived a year in Onehunga and sort of walked through the park where the swing pool is, go catch the bus at Royal Oak and head into town, go to uni. And you're right, there's not much around.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. And I mean, like, as a grown up, obviously, you know, you kind of find your own things to do. You drive somewhere, you meet up with your friends, etc. You get involved in more activities, you know, you do more sport, etc. But, you know, as a kid, when you don't really have any of the resources, you don't have especially the transport to get around, you know, like, eventually I got me a bicycle, and again, like, you know, how far will I get on a bicycle? You know, I'm not going to ride for like 20 kilometers away, I'll get lost. But yeah, that's kind of what, like, the biggest shock was for me. And like, I've gained a lot of weight because of that, because, well, you know, I'm just like, okay, cool, like, I'm not outside doing anything, I'm sitting at home watching TV and eating all the time. I like doubled in size in the first 3 months. Not to mention the food prices. Food prices were like, for the average wage in New Zealand, are a lot better than they were in Russia at the time. You know, like, I could afford to eat chips all the time.
So who'd you come here with?
My parents. Just my mum and dad.
And what brought them here?
They just, you know, they wanted to get away from that. They wanted to get away from the 90s Russia. That's what it was. I mean, that's the main motivation, is like, they, you know, there was a lot of crime around, and for them, that just wasn't their thing. You know, my dad had a lot of friends involved in, you know, all of this, and it's just like, you know, it just wasn't his thing. So, you know, as a guy that just kind of wants to work and do his, you know, what normal people do, that was hard for him. You know, the same for my mom. So, like, they tried many places. They've tried everything. They've tried Israel at a time when all the Russians pretended to be Jewish just to go there. And then the same with the States. You know, like, you go to New York City and Brighton Beach, you know, it's little Odessa and whatnot, but that's how a lot of the Russians ended up there. They kind of, at the time, they had this whole, like, asylum program where they say, you know, Jews are not having a very good time in Russia, so we'll let them into America. And a lot of Russians pretended to be Jews just to get in. So, I mean, they tried that. They tried Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, and it's just, it was all down to kind of laws and regulations. And finally, something came from with New Zealand. My mum had to come here a few months before us and get a job offer before me and my dad could come across. So,
And so what was your dad doing, Communist Russia versus 90s Russia, and then what did he come do in New Zealand?
So, you know, Communist Russia, obviously, he would have been relatively young. He was my age when I was born. Yeah, so he was 30 when I was born, and up to that point, he had an engineering degree. Because it's a port city. There's a lot of kind of ships and all of that kind of stuff. So he had an engineering degree. He was a police officer at the time. So he quit all that, like all the industry started crumbling, so he became a police officer, but that wasn't kind of his career aim. He wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
So while he was a police officer, he studied law, and around when I was maybe 2 years old, he finally got his degree, and he became a business lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. He kind of had to, which in itself in the 90s Russia, given that business is a whole new concept, was interesting. But when we moved here, none of the Russian degrees are recognized here. So he actually had to go and work at a shipyard, and he was painting yachts for a while until I think he actually got lucky that somebody chose to kind of overlook certain things and say, hey, look, I don't care about your qualifications, I just know this shit, so we'll get you in. So he started working in a similar engineering field. Same went for my mom. She got her law degree as well in Russia, came over here, it wasn't recognized. She was working at Pack and Save in Royal Oak.
Oh right, yeah.
And at the very same Pack and Save that I had my first job a few years later. Yeah. So, we had like 2 generations work at that Pack and Save in the span of 5 years.
It's not what you know, it's who you know, mate.
Exactly. Yeah. And then so she had to go and do a course at AUT and, become a legal executive in that. So, just something to, figure something out to try and kind of move on from that and not get stuck in those kind of jobs, yeah.
Cool. So what did you do to sort of make friends and create a little group in New Zealand?
Oh, it took a while, man. It took a long time because, I didn't realize how much of a dynamic race created in New Zealand. I wasn't familiar with that. Because Russia is a multicultural country, especially, if you're looking at all the ex-Soviet republics, we got Chechnya is part of Russia. We got Dagestan. I'm sure you watch UFC. You got half of the Russians in UFC are actually Dagestanis. Habib and whatnot. So you got all those guys. You got obviously on my end we had heaps of Asians. We had Koreans, Chinese, Japanese. So it was a very mixed culture. But I didn't realize until I came here that race plays such a dynamic, and I found that to be probably the biggest barrier to making friends at the time, especially in Onehunga.
Was that because you just didn't fit into it?
Well, pretty much. It was an interesting dynamic where I wasn't white enough to be white, and I wasn't and I wasn't anything else. Yeah. So I kind of fell through the crack here. I wasn't with anybody, and there were no other Russians around.
Yeah.
So for me, that's what I found really weird. I was just okay, cool. People are just people. I don't okay, cool. You're this, I'm that. What's the difference? But I found that to be the barrier for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to make friends. I learned English pretty quickly.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I picked it up in about within 3 months.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a pretty good effort considering that when I showed up, I knew nothing. My first day of school, I knew yes and no. And I just said yes and no to everything. And then, and people kept trying to talk to me as well. I'm I don't understand what the fuck he's saying. Come on, man. And I just keep saying yes, yes. And then eventually everybody started laughing. I'm what did I just say yes to?
Yeah.
So, I picked that up pretty quickly. But, to actually kind of fall into the culture, it took me until I was actually in intermediate to kind of make friends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it took a little while to adjust.
Yeah. In the meantime, what sort of occupied your thoughts, occupied your time? Were you sort of in a place where you were consciously trying to connect, or did you look at other things to occupy your time and occupy your thoughts?
A bit of both, because, you know, obviously, like, this was all still new to me, and I enjoyed kind of exploring what people were like from these, you know, different cultures that are like I've never met before, I never knew before, like I've known absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
You know, because you got to remember at the time, like, even the internet wasn't as available as it is now.
Yeah, that's right.
And yeah, we didn't even have a computer until we moved here. So, yeah, in that sense, like, all of that was new to me. So I kind of, you know, I made the effort. So I had, you know, eventually I started kind of like getting along with certain people, you know, chopping it up and that, but not to the extent where I could be like, oh, you know, these are my friends, I'm going to go and hang out with them outside of, you know, school hours or anything like that. Yeah, outside of school hours, you know, obviously, like, I ate a lot. But yeah, no, like, I read books, I listened to a lot of music. I attribute a lot of my English language to rap music. That's
who
how
you
I
listen to?
Eminem.
Yeah, I was about to say,
Yeah.
was it Eminem?
The Marshall Mathers LP was the album.
Yeah.
And it just kind of blew my mind, because I bought it when I was still in Russia. I listened to the music while I was still in Russia, but I didn't understand it. Like, I don't know what the hell he's talking about. Like, I knew he swore a lot.
Because that was 2000, right? Was that when they came out?
I think so, yeah. So I would have had that tape for a little while too. So I listened to it, and I knew he swore a lot.
Yeah.
You know, so I knew that was part of the game, but, you know, I didn't know what he was talking about otherwise.
Yeah.
That was just fully over my head. And I've listened to that tape so many times, and then one day I actually started understanding what he said. It's just like a light bulb went off. Like, I can't describe how interesting that moment was, to actually understand what you've been listening to for years.
Yeah.
And now you actually, like, it makes sense to you. So, yeah, that was a good moment.
But so they wanted to think of it, because it's like pretty vicious. I went back and listened to it not long ago, because just on TikTok I saw these guys talking about Eminem, and they're like, "Do you know what Eminem stands for?" And like, "Oh, like the chocolates," and then they were like, "Oh, surely it's Marshall Mathers," and they're like, "Nah, it stands for something like everyone's mum is nice except mine." That's right, everyone's mum is nice except mine.
Wow.
I know. I was just like, oh man.
Yeah, no, I mean, I eventually figured out that, he had a really bad relationship with his mother and, you know, his ex-wife. You know, there's that one song in particular which is, like, really violent, you know, towards his wife.
Is Kill You on that album? God, that one's psycho.
Kill You, it is, yeah.
But you go kill you.
Yeah, when I was just a little baby boy, my mama used to tell me, see that. And that's why I remember a lot of these lyrics, because I've listened to it a million times, and that's, you know, that's where my English came from.
Yeah.
And, you know, suffice to say, at the time, I swore a lot. You know,
you're like, it's a Russian thing. Yeah, it's like
that's how I learned English.
Yeah. What about movies? Did you tune into any of them, or TV shows or anything like that?
You know, I was into all the normal stuff that was on TV. You know, I was into Dragon Ball Z like everybody else. Yeah. You know, that was my shit. Like, I watched it all. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you have that in Russia or no?
No, there was something that, I mean, it might have been there, but I wasn't really into it until, you know, I was at that age. It was kind of, you know, those early teens that, you know, 11 years old, yeah. So I never really paid attention to it until then, but yeah.
Nice. So you brought up MMA in Dagestan. Like, where did fight sports start for you, man?
Not until later. Yeah. It wasn't until I was in my last year at school. And, you know, it was actually interesting, because it wasn't like I didn't get into it for, you know, for those reasons that I wanted to fight or anything like that. It was actually, like, at the time, you know, like, as a teenager, you know, you kind of deal with a lot of shit, and you know, like, I used to play basketball a lot. There was kind of a sport of choice, and, like, one year, like, I think I must have been about 15 years old. Like, you know, I was just having a real rough time, and I don't know why, but that day I decided I really wanted to run. So it's like, I've never been for a run before, you know, like, we actually consciously go for like an exercise kind of run with your headphones, etc. So I went for a run, and then I started doing it on a regular basis, and I got good at it. You know, I started being able to run a lot, and, you know, I've lost a lot of weight that way as well, like a lot of my kind of teenage weight. And by the time I got around to year 13, I actually, like, came first in the 10K run. Like, I got pretty good at it. But then at that stage, I kind of got to the point where it wasn't challenging me anymore. And like there was a lot of boxing stuff happening around me. I also have to kind of, give a shout out to Joseph Parker. I went to school with him. He was in my class, and at the time he was kind of coming up as this, that he was taking boxing seriously. The whole like Commonwealth Games, etc. So he inspired myself and quite a few of the other boys to kind of take up boxing as well. And it was around the time when David Tua and Shane Cameron happened as well.
Oh wow,
yeah. So that had a big impact on us, and we decided to kind of start kind of taking it serious, and and it was around then that we had our first fight.
How long had Joe been boxing for, and like did you guys really know that he was good?
He had his first fight when he was 12 from what I remember. So I remember when he started boxing, and it was just kind of like, okay, cool, like these guys do rugby, he does boxing, and nobody makes a big deal out of it, everybody does something. But it would have been around 16, 17 when it became a known thing that he was actually competing at a level that that was recognized, that he was one of the best in New Zealand. And then there was all this talk of Commonwealth Games, Olympics, etc. So we knew that he was going to go somewhere with this. But I mean, this is around the end of high school was where it started. So I had a few fights from then onwards, and then I got so involved in fitness that I also kind of wanted to coach that as well. Like I really enjoyed the game to the point where it wasn't just about myself, but I liked helping people. I liked being in people's corners, So, and eventually, kind of, I stopped fighting. I wasn't great. Like I'm honest with myself. I wasn't like I wasn't anything special at it. But I still love the game. I still keep myself involved as much as possible. I still get to every fight that I can. I'm still involved in the fight team. Myself and one of the other boys that I was working with, we kind of decided to make it official, put a team together. He's the head coach now.
And that's Mayhem, is that right?
Mayhem boxing team over in Auckland, and one of our female fighters was a professional world champ, WBO, which is a great achievement. She had her first fight when she was 39. by 42 she was a world champion. Like
wow,
top of the food chain.
What was her athletic background?
Group fitness.
Wow.
Really? Yeah, she was just she's just got that mindset. She likes a challenge. She likes to get in the deep. Like she likes the hurt business. She's not gonna get away from that. She wants to get right up in it. And the first fight she signed up to was a charity fight. It was for Canteen, from what I remember. So it was helping kids with cancer, and like she just kind of got lit up after that first fight. Like she wanted more, so she's had a few corporate fights, had a couple amateur fights. At which point they told her she was too old to fight in the amateurs, the golden gloves and whatnot. So she's fought like one tournament down in Taupo, and we said, okay, well, let's go pro. And she kind of worked her way through the pros pretty quickly.
So what did that look like? Was there many professional competitors in New Zealand that she could fight, or? Yes,
because in fact it was quite interesting. In her weight division, the majority of the top ranked world fighters were actually in New Zealand.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So and she's had to fight them multiple times as well. That's the other thing is the competition was pretty fierce. It was the few, but they went for it, and she's done pretty well. And she's won a vacant world title against a Kiwi girl,
right? Yeah.
And she defended it against a Canadian girl, and that was one hell of a fight. It was one of the best female boxing fights that I've ever seen. She broke her face. I'm not kidding. She actually broke her cheekbone. So like that's the power we're talking. I think a lot of people kind of underestimate the kind of power that female fighters possess. Like this is nothing to play with. She beats dudes up in the gym.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, actually, I think because you're saying about charity boxing, the David Tua Shane Cameron fight, that was when I was working at the Captain Cook in Dunedin, and so we had the fight on, of course, like everyone had the fight on, and we packed out the garden bar, but we put in an inflatable boxing ring, and so all us security guys jumped in and did boxing, and I fought, because I was a small guy, I just sort of hung around upstairs with the freshers and kicked them out when they were a little bit drunk, and so I fought the cleaner, who he was much lighter, but he actually did boxing, and yeah, I had like tunnel vision, and I managed to win on, I don't know whose opinion, but I managed to come out winning from that. And then when we were in Auckland, Varsity Rugby Club, I don't know how they had a link with City Boxing, and we did a bit of a fundraiser, and yeah, I had a boxing match with my mate, and by the end of the third round, it was only 3 rounds, I could finally actually hear my corner and like realise that there was people around me watching. It was just like, oh, what a sport that's just like so, I don't know, when you're an amateur, just fear-based, you're just kind of flailing, and my mate was just swinging, and my corner said, just jab him twice, bounce out, let him swing, and then come back in and jab him again and do whatever you want to him, because he's missed you and he's off balance, and it worked.
First fights are always a story, eh? First fights are always a story. My first fight was pretty hilarious, to be honest, because my whole game plan went out the window, and it always does, because you spend so much time preparing for it, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna do this and that, and as soon as you come out, like, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of lights, everything you get in there, and you're like, all right, like you get real savage real quick, because like, okay, I'm here to fight, but you forget what you're actually supposed to do. So the guard is way down here, and just going for it, and I got a standing 8 count against me in the first round, so I kind of got
dazed off straight away.
Like, okay, yeah, there's a count, and I got properly dropped in the second round, and that was actually like, that was an experience in itself, because I blacked out, and when I opened my eyes, a guy was standing over me, and I thought I'd been down for a long time.
Yeah.
So I jumped up real quick. I jumped up as quick as I can. Said, no, I'm still in this.
Couldn't hear him counting.
Yeah, but then when I looked at the video, it literally looked like I bounced. I fell down and I got right back up. But in my mind, I've been down there for a while. So yeah, and then I went back to my corner and I said, look, you've lost 2 rounds. You got 1 round, and you need to put him away. Like, otherwise you're gone. And they just said, look, he has his guard real high, so body shots are there. And so basically in the last round, we did 2 rounds around the ring, just kind of 2 circles of me just like throwing the same punch over and over, just right to the ribs, and eventually I actually broke that guy's ribs.
Oh, gosh.
And I won by TKO after getting dropped twice. And you could just see me at the end. It's like, oh yeah, you win, and I'm standing there like, yeah. And then I go back to my corner. I was like, did I win? I'm like, yeah. I couldn't remember what song I walked out to. None of that, So,
oh dear.
Yeah.
Okay. So like that's quite cool that you got to watch the video back. That would have been pretty helpful. Did that, like you said, you did some fighting. You realised that you weren't that good. How did you then turn the passion of like seeing the picture and what it should look like, and being able to portray that to a boxer? And Jimmy Hutton that I had on recently talked about people that support you, they're loving critics, and like good coaches are loving critics. You like do anything for them, they can like tell you straight that that's no good, and you take it on board and you don't get offended, and then they also help you improve. Like how did that sort of mindset start to happen, and where did you sort of geek out, and what sort of resources did you use to help people?
Well, obviously after the first fight, you kind of look at it, and because I've had a few fights afterwards, and like you look at it and you're like, okay, next time definitely remember to keep your hands up. That's like rule number 1. And I've improved over those times. I remember there's like, okay, cool, yeah, it's gonna be loud, it's gonna be like that. You know what to expect. You've gone through that first fight, and now you're like, okay, you know what to expect, and kind of make your best effort to try and counter that. Like, okay, cool, like. My thing was like, I'm not going to look at anyone. I'm going to look at the floor. I'm going to get in the ring, and once I'm in the ring, everything outside the ring goes black. I don't care who's there. I hear my corner. That's all the people I listen to. That definitely helped. But when it came to helping other people, I think I got to give a lot of credit to my previous coaches. I've looked at them at how they did it, because like you say, there were were good critics, and I also realized that you can't be nice to your fighter in the corner. No matter what, no matter how well they're doing, you never tell them that. And that's something I you see you see in the UFC. I've seen that happen to Joe Parker as well. When you go back to the corner and they start telling, tremendous jab. It's like, you do not say that ever. Because you're tired. I just I'm here. I need an excuse to take a rest. Then give it to me. Yeah. So you need to be honest. Just you never tell them you're doing good. You say when you knock them out, you can rest. Otherwise you stay on that game. You stay on that bike, and as long as it's in the judge's hands, never think you won. Yeah. So so you always fight. Fight till the bitter end. In that respect, I kind of try to bring together my experience of what it was like to kind of be overwhelmed by the experience, by being tired, by having all this noise and everything, by wanting to look around when you go back to the corner.
In the face.
Exactly, everything's ringing, and you're just kind of trying to soak up the atmosphere at the same time, but you only got 1 minute, and that's the fastest minute of your life. So I kind of got to the point where I started kind of trying to catch people in the midst of that, and kind of bringing them back down to here. It's okay, stay with me. I know you're out of breath. I've kind of tried to get them to breathe properly and listen while they breathe. So kind of try and do my best to keep people focused in those corners. And that probably is my biggest thing. That's why I love being in people's corners. I think to me, I can really connect to people. Yeah.
So then that's the fight. How does the training and the reps, how do you sort of go in the waves of a training period and periodization of training and things like that? You can't spar all the time, so how do you sort of work an athlete towards a fight?
Trial and error, because not everybody's the same. You you have to try and figure that person out as well. There are people who can spar every day. They literally are. They like to get on their bike. They get in there. They're the ones that don't risk injury that much. So that's the other thing you kind of have to pay attention to. You can't have a guy in there just having wars every day, because otherwise he's going to wear himself down. But there are people who can kind of have a more constructive approach to sparring. Hence, they can do it every day. Others, you kind of need to break up a little bit of thinking versus applying. And you just kind of have to figure out whether people learn by learning and then applying, or they kind of just need to be on that bike and learn as you go. And that's the most important thing about figuring these things out.
So what are you sort of seeing with fight sports and the carrot of the UFC, and compared to just being a boxer? It's to me, it's sort of when The Ultimate Fighter was the TV show, I watched it, and there was so many different levels of where people came from. There was people that just appeared to have come off the street, and there was people that were in big team gyms, and it was highly competitive, and it raised the bar real fast. And they had all the coaches in there mentoring people of the two teams, and they sort of made the matchups and things like that. And then it turned into UFC fighting.
And MMA as a sport. You know, because at the time it was just what is this? Let's take a bunch of styles, throw them together, see who wins. Who's got the best style. Over time they started learning that, jiu-jitsu is quite good. If you're going for striking, Muay Thai is quite good. So if you can put the two together, you have a pretty well-rounded fighter. But then, there's other things that, that are quite specific to, say, Muay Thai, then they're not going to be as good in the clinch, which is, essentially dirty boxing again. So you have to draw some elements from there. So it's just taking elements from various different sports and putting them together to kind of create a fighter that's, well-rounded. But if you're talking about the popularity of UFC versus boxing at the moment, man, boxing's not having a good time. Let's be honest about it. Boxing's been reduced to a lot of YouTubers fighting. They keep bringing out Mike Tyson and everything, and I know people want to see it because it's Mike Tyson. I personally don't, because I don't think Mike Tyson needs to fight anymore. He's done his fighting. He's achieved what he's needed to do. Like, let Mike live. Yeah. But yeah, like I have respect for every single combat sport, regardless of whether I personally like it or not. If, for me, I didn't find. I've tried jiu-jitsu. Personally, I couldn't quite immerse myself into it the way some people can, and I have a lot of respect for the sport. But I just know that, like, I don't receive it the same way. Everybody's got their preferences. So in terms of that, I prefer the striking sports. But at the end of the day, I think the reason why UFC is so popular is just because you never know who's going to go against who. It's more exciting than, two guys that punch. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in that respect. Especially when, the caliber of guys that are punching is just not the same anymore. You have your top names that everybody wants to see, but even then, you never know how it's going to go because of all the money involved. Mm-hmm. Like you have those boring fights because of that, because there's just too much to lose. It's not the same as the Mike Tyson days where, you just show up to demolish the guy.
Well, it's even like growing up in New Zealand tour, going to fight Lennox Lewis and knowing that, like, if he somehow wins this is incredible. Like, we all knew that, like, David Tua could hit him, although Lennox Lewis had a good jaw too, but, like, he could hit him and maybe win and become the world champion. But he's, like, Lennox Lewis was the world champion. He was amazing. And I was like, and, Tua lasted, but it was just like, the more and more you watched, you're like, oh, don't know if this is going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, at the time as well, it was, I feel like it was a different caliber of boxing. It was the David Tua's, Mike Tyson's, Lennox Lewis, Roy Jones Jr. was
Vander Holyfield.
Yeah, all of that. So there was it was the same dynamic as UFC is experiencing at this time. Because there's a lot of guys. It's not just one guy that kind of dominates the rest, and there's nothing happening. It happens in certain weight divisions and all that, but there's enough going around for it to remain exciting. And I think they really capitalized on the whole COVID thing a lot better than any other combat sport as well.
UFC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've set up the Fight Island, they set up these, matches without audiences, and they just ran with it. Now they have events like every weekend.
Yeah.
Whereas with boxing, we have to wait for months, and then somebody gets sick, somebody gets injured, and, and that hypes everything up so much. It creates such high expectations that by the time we get around to it, it's kind of, and never kind of lives up to it anymore. You get your great moments where, like, Andy Ruiz knocked out Anthony Joshua, when Tyson Fury.
Yes,
Tyson Fury beat Deontay Wilder. When everybody was kind of giving him the edge. And I mean, I've watched the latest Anthony Joshua fight against Usyk. I think it was this past weekend or the weekend before that. Yeah, and I mean that was a good fight. But again, we thought that Anthony Joshua was the guy, and then he got dethroned here. So it's kind of like there's too much hit and miss. It's hard to be consistently great. Yeah.
How did you feel about the Olympics then? Like, I saw a lot of. I didn't really watch too much of the Olympics. The only fight of David, is it Nika?
David Nika, yeah.
Nika, yeah. The only fight I saw of him was the medal fight. Mm-hmm. But, like, that's because I was working. But I'd check in and follow it, and I was seeing, like, lots of comments like, oh, this is what boxing needs. And people were sort of saying, well, these people are, the best of the best, and that's why they haven't gone pro, because they want to win Olympic gold. But, like, is that how you sort of see that Olympic boxing level? And it's a shame that it's every 4 years. Well, there's the Commonwealth Games as well, but
yeah, I mean, it's. I think what's also changed is that you used to have to put in a lot of work as an amateur to become a pro.
Right.
These days it's not so much a thing anymore because, well, for some reason, amateur boxing, AIBA, has become very politicized, very bureaucratic, and it's just it holds a lot of fighters back to the point where they say, why do this? Mm-hmm. I need to make money. I need to make a living out of this. Because it's all fun when you're like 18 years old doing this, but like these guys are starting to have families, when they start hitting their 20s, and they say, look, well, what am I doing with my life? Yeah. So, in that respect, that's why a lot of them kind of choose to bypass all that. But not to mention, there's a lot of guys that just kind of show up, like the likes of Sonny Bill. Yeah. And, nothing against Sonny Bill, but again, like he wasn't an Olympic level boxer. He just decided to show up and fight, and that kind of paved the way for these things. But I think over time, it brought down the quality of fighters overall as well. Yeah, so that's why the truly great ones, they're the ones that have been to the Olympics, or at least tried to get in, or at least went to Commonwealth Games, something they fought on the world level before they turned pro.
Yeah. It was interesting you're talking about, why am I doing this? David put up a video last week that was of him last year trying to still go to training when the Olympics were postponed. And it was such a raw video, just he's sitting outside, it's a beautiful day, and he's just what am I doing? I can't do this. I'm so stoked that he recorded that. And then, went to the Olympics and got that silver. It was pretty cool. Did you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I really hope that it takes off for him. I think a lot of our boxers are kind of suffering because of COVID as well. Even Junior Far's talking about moving. Everybody's talking about moving overseas because it's just, there's no way they can have fights here. They can bring sparring partners here, and it just kind of feels like it's a drain of talent because of that. Yeah, but David is great. He's a great dude. He's a great fighter, and I really hope that he can kind of get a shot at all of that.
Yeah, no, he's a great dude. So I'm talking for the Waterboy the other day at his presentation. I was like, what a good dude. A couple of guys I played rugby with have sparred with him as well. Yeah,
a few guys from our team have worked with him and his brother as well.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. On the flip side, what did you think about Mayweather versus Conor McGregor?
There was that as well. And I mean, again, I think Mayweather paved the way for all those YouTube fights and all the gimmicky novelty kind of fights where he just decided to say, okay, cool, I'm done fighting boxers and I can just come back, put on a show, and make you some money. Yeah, just like that. And that's that's what he showed people, and that's what people decided to jump on. And that's why there's even right now there's all these problems with UFC fighters saying why are we not getting paid the same way these guys do. Nobody makes multiple millions this way here. Even McGregor being the highest paid athlete last year, it wasn't because of his UFC fights, it was because of his whiskey.
Yeah. His side hustle.
Well, exactly. Yeah, he's as far as combat sports goes, he kind of took a page out of Mayweather's book and became a marketing genius for for what he is. But as far as being a good fighter, well, who was it that said something about he won 1 or 2 fights since the Obama administration or something like that. So if you look at the actual results, he's not winning fights, but he still manages to kind of keep the spotlight on himself somehow. And that's what it's become about, especially in boxing. In UFC, you have Uncle Dana calling the shots still, so you're not going to hold that for too long if that's not what he wants.
Yeah, he's still got that ethos of that we want to find out who the best fighter is.
Yeah, and in that respect, right now is an exciting time for UFC. There's a lot of really good guys. There's a lot of competition. It's just because somebody holds a title, it's not going to be like when Klitschko held the boxing title. Where it just got boring. No one could beat him. It's just like, oh, okay, he's fighting another guy. Whatever. Yeah, no one's going to beat him.
That is kind of what's good about UFC as well, is that it's matched up. And like you said, there's lots of people there at the moment, so it's kind of hotly debated who gets the matchup. I think that's another cool thing.
It has its ups and downs. Yeah, on one hand, it's good because in boxing, you still have people picking and choosing fights. You have all their management and politics, and do we have a deal? No, we don't have a deal because we feel like we got too much to lose by fighting you. So we need to make sure that if we lose, at least we make some money. Yeah, whereas in UFC, it's like, hey, you're up, let's go. But yeah, I do feel like they need to pay them a bit more
in the UFC.
Yeah. I feel like they're making enough money to be able to pay people more.
Yeah. They're probably still hanging on to when the UFC was broke, I guess.
Maybe, yeah.
Whatever that meant. But you said about like marketing genius, and you, before we started recording, you said you're studying some communications, and then I said, well, is that how the reels started? How did the reels start? Like, it was obviously you came down here, you were locked up, and yeah.
Like the reels actually started just before that. The reason why I started doing that in the first place is my first ideas, I also wanted to do a podcast. Because that, like, as much as I enjoy a bit of humor, like I don't see myself as a comedian by nature. Like I'm not like a Joe Rogan type. They can do both. They can talk and be funny. But with that being said, I just kind of wanted to create a little something to get people engaged. And that, like if you look at what I'm doing quite often, a lot of my comedy still tries to kind of have a certain message behind it. I like to make people think. That was my thing. So like, the whole podcast thing, that's what I wanted to do it for. It wasn't to kind of market myself or to kind of just, become a popular guy. Like, I don't care about all of that, but I would like to get people thinking. Because I do have a lot of ideas that I believe would be beneficial to get out, because especially in the modern world where we're so caught up in everything, we've got so much going on, we're bombarded with information, we work harder than ever, because the competition is high, the prices are growing, the houses get more expensive, and this grind and hustle is always glorified too. It's just you need to be in the midst of action, but because of that, you're distracted from what's going on. You just perceive everything as that's the way it is. And from my life experiences, going right back to growing up in Russia, moving here, experiencing all these different things, experiencing the racial dynamics, the economic dynamics, and all these changes, you kind of derive certain ideas that are universal to people. Like I said, people are different, but they're also the same. And I think that if we can find the things, and especially because right now, I don't know whether it was, Donald Trump or somebody before that did it, but, right now we really like to talk about all the differences. We like to separate ourselves, be it on race, be it on gender, sexual orientation, whatever. There's just all these different ways to kind of separate yourself. I'm different to you because... if we try to kind of put a bit more attention on what makes people more similar than different, I feel like a lot more can be achieved, and it's just an overall cultural change that could lead to a bit more positivity in people's lives, and that is why I wanted to do a podcast. That is why I thought a good way to kind of draw people in would be through some funny reels. So like on one hand it's entertainment, on the other hand, hey, it might get through. It's not going to be every single time, every single one, but we do our best to try.
No, I went through them all, and I was, you started off with those 5 days of thoughts, and like you could see there on the Friday, you were kind of like, man, what did I get myself in for? How are we sort of feeling after that first week of posting every day, posting a reel every day, having some thoughts? That
again, that was my partner that encouraged me to do it, because I was kind of social media shy in that sense. Like, I was like, I'll post a cool picture every now and again, like, hey, this is what I'm doing, like as most people do, it's like a highlight reel of your life. But like she said, hey, well, you've got a lot of cool thoughts going on, so like just start putting them out there, just talk to the camera a bit, like get familiar with that as well, because that's the other thing, is like it's easy to speak to a person. I mean, even speaking to a person isn't always easy, but, speaking to a camera is even harder. And especially knowing that, you're going to put this out there. You're exposing yourself quite a bit, so you kind of, got to get yourself ready for that. Because not everybody's going to be receptive of your ideas.
And they can hide behind a keyboard and just throw it at you too.
Exactly, yeah. So you have to be ready for it. Like, a lot of people complain about it. I kind of come to terms with, like, I know what to expect. I know what I'm exposing myself to when I put these things out. And, some people are not going to be nice about it. And that's cool, But yeah, like that was my motivation behind that first week, is just to kind of try and get connected to the people, because like I realize I follow a lot of people. I like all their pictures, whatever it is that that they're posting. I know them from around the way. I know who they are. Like I'm I'm not big on following, celebrities and whatnot. Like I'll have a few that I kind of really grew up with, but I like to follow people that are kind of still within this sphere. And that was a good way for me to kind of engage with people. Not everything I said was like got a lot of response, but some of it, especially like there was one video that was a Thursday video, because it was like Monday, Tuesday,
Thursday's always the biggest day if you look at like trends on social media for some reason. Thursday must be like nearly the end of the week. People are tuning out a little bit.
Yeah, and they're kind of starting to get into like a more their zone. But it was that day I kind of posted something about supporting your people's business and just kind of not being the audience, because I've experienced a lot of that in the past and what I did, be it through like personal training business, or before I went to work for a bank, I did a bit of financial advice as well. So kind of you try to reach out to people and be like, hey, support a brother. I'm out here doing good things. And like a lot of people close to you kind of just like sit back and watch. Like, I don't know if I want to get down with this. I'll see if other people respond. But it's just like, but you're my people, like you're supposed to back me up on this. But it's funny because it turns out that a lot of people feel that way. So I put that out there.
Feel what way? Feel that their friends aren't supporting them, or feel that they can only just watch?
No, they feel that they're not supported.
Yeah.
Like you have a lot of friends. Everybody likes your stuff and always wants to shake your hand and say hello when they see you in public. And then you reach out and actually try to do something constructive, and they're kind of like, oh yeah, I don't know. And that's what a lot of people felt. A lot of people responded to it, especially a lot of people trying to do something, be it a business. It'll be guys that had gyms, guys that had automotive businesses, anything like that. Guys who were making content, trying to get this stuff out there. And they really responded to it. Musicians, there was the other ones, they had a lot of complaints from those guys saying, yeah, man, like that's true. A lot of guys want like free tickets to your gigs, but I'm like, man, this is what I do. Like, support me. Like, buy the damn ticket.
Yeah, it was funny. During level 4, the guys that I interviewed from Hawke's Bay, Sons boys, three of them were living together, and they made heaps of like raps every day. One's a videographer, so they were doing like awesome edits and everything. And I was just like, buzzing out on what they're making to share it. And then they were like, one of the best of them were like, oh, thanks so much for sharing. I just said like, bro, it's so easy. There's a button. Press the button, it's in your story, and then it's gone the next day. Like, if you're, 100 or 50 or 10 people see it and go, well, that was cool. Oh, that was cool. Oh, that was cool. And then, old Facebook got shut down last night, and that was because a leak about how the algorithm's tending towards negative shit. If you're out there posting positive shit, well, then that also improves the experience of everyone else. So, yeah, it's just easy, like press the share button.
Yeah, well, like people want to be seen, and like they just want to feel a bit of support. If it's not always necessarily money. You don't always have to buy something. You just have to show, like, look, my man's doing something over here. Yeah, like I may or may not be one of his customers, one of his consumers, but you still help. Because like that's still publicity, and it's still good for you, and it still helps. And there was a lot of memes around it at the time. There was another guy that I follow, like an Aussie rapper who I've never heard one of his songs, but he always seems to talk a lot of like really.
Do you know who it is?
Spanion.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
It's just like he.
Oh, actually, I saw a video.
A tat on his throat and everything.
The other day, yeah.
Yeah, and like he like talks a lot of like real stuff, and I've heard something similar from him, and I'm like, what, like, yeah, that's true. Like, there's a lot of people that are like that you as soon as your friend gets into something, rather than going and supporting his business, you kind of approach him for free stuff. Whereas like you're the first in line to go buy Kylie Jenner's something, you're always sharing, Meek Mill released a new album. Like, he's gonna be all right. He's got like millions of followers. Help your boy. He's only got 1,000. Like it's that kind of thing, and a lot of people related to that. A lot of people are trying really hard right now, especially with COVID and everything. And yeah, man, like they really need the support, and they're just not getting it. And I think that's why they responded to it.
Yeah, and I think with musicians as well, like KMZ posted the other day how many people have listened to his album that he released a couple of weeks ago. It's called Funkmaster Z, and he was just like super stoked that 50,000 people have played one of his tracks, and like it's like chuck it in your playlist. If you're on a drive, start your playlist with your mates' music, and share it with your friends. Like check this cool song out.
Yeah, because it's like that's a real person right there.
Yeah.
Like exactly where that support is going. You know that you're doing something positive, so do it. Why not?
Yeah.
So like in that sense, that really resonated with people. But yeah, and then after that, I don't know how that whole idea of creating extra characters came around.
I was about to ask you, where did your alter egos come from?
Because I think it was mainly because I was getting to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm talking, but like what I didn't want to do is sound preachy. Like I didn't want to come up with something every other day and be like, okay, you know what you need to do? You need to do this now. And it's just like like eventually you're gonna start sounding like you're just telling people what to do all the time. Nobody likes that. But at the same time, I kind of wanted to address certain issues that I thought were important. Like certain thoughts, and I thought, hey, well, like maybe there's a way to do that, like to kind of try and act it out somehow. But how do I do it? And it was watching Khabib. It was watching Khabib, and he gave an interview with like a really thick accent. I don't know, maybe his English wasn't as good at the time, but everyone just found it hilarious. I'm like, you know what? I can actually do this accent very easily.
Yeah.
So I'll give it a go, and then I'm like, okay, let's think. What's like a typical, like stereotypical Russian guy that like from a Hollywood movie, track pants, squatting everywhere, got the hat on. Lots of
what as well? I saw one of the videos that was mostly that guy, and it's quite funny that you've got this video about the vibes of people. Like I saw one of your videos that was mostly your Russian alter ego, and I was like, man, he's an intimidating dude. And then you actually watch the other videos that's more you're like, oh no, he's actually like a real thoughtful dude, and this is just a character.
Yeah, and then like in the process I thought, hey, like that's pretty cool. It's kind of like at the end of the day, it's also somewhat like a different side to you as well, because we all have them. And that's the reason why I decided to create another guy, which the glasses guy. You kind of have the two kind of polar opposites here. You have one guy that's just like mischievous, having fun, somewhat thick, like somewhat conservative in certain ideas. It's just like I'm just this almost like he's somewhat like a what could be described by some as like a toxic male, it's just like he's one of those kind of guys. And then you got the other guy, he's all like I'm very woke, but he's also driven by fear. He's not like he's just not about it. He's not a fun time, but he's that side.
Yeah.
So like the polar opposite, and I'm just kind of in the middle. I'm experiencing both of these things. We all are. But like when you can kind of separate them and show them as their own characters, it kind of creates some interesting scenarios. And you're just by yourself. You don't need a whole cast of people. It's yeah.
Yeah. So like how you recording the parts? Are you kind of having a dialogue in stopping, or like recording the bit, going and recording the other bit? Like what are you doing?
Well, because of like the costumes and everything, I do try to think of the whole thing in my mind before I do it. Sometimes I even write it down, and then I'll be like, okay, who's saying what? So I'll be like, okay, I'm not gonna change in between every time, so I'll dress as one guy, record all of his bits, and then I'll dress the other guy, and then kind of cut it all together and make it into a transition. So it takes a bit of creativity as far as scenario goes, because you kind of have to take it somewhere. And reality is, when you think about it, it's not actually that funny. It's just the fact that the guy has an accent. Like had it been any other guy, it's just like, okay, any other like.
Well, definitely the first video that you brought him in was fucking hilarious. I was rolling laughing.
Yeah, the good old ROC. Russian Olympic Committee, Russian organized crime.
That was brilliant, mate. He's got a good squat on him. Where does your deep squat come from, man?
Oh man, like that's just like a genetic thing.
Yeah,
you're born with it.
Just hanging out on the street playing dice or something.
Pretty much, yeah. Always get like you always got those track pants on. You got to have the freedom of movement. Jeans don't work as well.
Jeans don't work as well. Have you you're sort of posing open-ended questions in your videos? Have you had someone sort of give you a real triggered response and come at you with a barrage?
Yeah, no, that's happened, and I mean, like I said, I know what I'm getting myself into, but I also love a debate. I think there's a lot of people complaining online when they put content out, and they end up getting one of those responses, and they're like, oh man, this makes me feel real bad, and why do people do that? Why do people have to be such haters? And I'm like, hey, no, look, if that's how you're going to respond, let's see what's behind that. I'd challenge that, but I'd do it in a way where it's like, let's debate this. Because at the end of the day, I'm never gonna lose. Like, I'm either gonna, if I'm fundamentally wrong about something, I'm gonna learn a lesson here. I'm gonna see your point of view, and you can't argue with logic, but otherwise, I'm gonna show you why you shouldn't be a hater right now. So that's how I approach it. And yeah, I think it's all about kind of having that open mind to things.
Yeah, I don't know why. Of late, I've sort of engaged with a couple of people online, and one of the sort of tools I have to sort of create some space has been like, can you elaborate on, particularly if someone's being like trying to raise a talking point, or they just regurgitated something, or then they kind of try and label you in their comment to try to tear you down. It's like, well, can you elaborate on what you mean by your point? Because I'm not trying to be nasty to you. I just want to talk to you about why you think that way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's what it takes. Is I think a lot of people kind of get into that combative mode right away. Like, you said something about me. Well, right back at you. Like, why are you being like this? I was like, okay, well, tell me why. Tell me why you're being like this. Hey, maybe I am wrong. Like, that's kind of how I approach it. It's like, I could actually be wrong, and if I am, I'm about to learn something. Yeah. I'm not gonna lose by doing this. I'm gonna walk away from this and being enlightened.
Yeah.
But otherwise, let's sort it out. And quite often it comes from a bad place for a lot of people. They kind of start exposing certain things and certain stresses that they experience. And that is exactly kind of what I'm trying to get at with these things. That's what I mean about people being so caught up in these things that anytime you challenge that status quo, that's kind of ingrained into them so much that some people can become quite defensive about it. But in saying that, if this is what I'm here to address, then it's just as good a way to do it, even if somebody's going to go about it in the mean way at the start.
I sort of will look through stuff, the website stuff, and try and sort of see what's happening in the news, and if something's of interest to me, then I'll go and read it, and I try sort of see if there's any source or research quoted that I can go and read up on. But generally, I don't consume much of the news. I kind of have an idea that if something's important enough, it'll find its way to me, and I'll be able to hear about it. And then I sort of find that a lot of people are very caught up in the narrative of what's being in the news, and then their response to it, and they sort of feel, like you were saying before, they're very polarized about how they feel absolutely what the news is saying, or everything the news is saying is wrong. And then once you sort of get them past the talking point and start engaging them in what they're thinking, then you start having a really fun conversation. And like I say, that's when you get exactly what we started with, people are different, but people are just people.
Exactly. And it's interesting you say that, because there's this whole thing, do your own research. For a lot of people, the newspaper is their own research. But the bottom line is, it's you have to look a bit deeper. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of these things, they take a lot of research to actually kind of ascertain what the final undeniable truth is. And I think a lot of people are not prepared to go that far. In fact, majority of the people are. And I myself, I'm not really going to go delve into every single issue, to that core. But what does interest me is people's perception of it. Like if you're going to be that aggressive pro or anti something, like let's understand that. Like never mind the research beneath all that, because you probably know about it as much as I do, which is not a lot. But why are you so quick to jump to that point and kind of put your entire life behind it? Yeah,
and it's fascinating that we'll get some people say in one sentence they'll say we don't know enough yet, but then in the next sentence they'll say that they're absolutely sure about something, the counterpoint. Like, that's contradictory. And then it's kind of like, what about the broader world? Oh no, it's absolutely that, and that's wrong. And you're like, do you see the contradiction of what you're saying?
Yeah.
And it's almost like you want to be like, can we slow down? And can you read that back to yourself? Sometimes I say that to people, like, can you read that back to yourself, or say that back to yourself, or say that out loud?
I think it's the aggression behind the uncertainty. That's the kind of cognitive dissonance you get. It's just like, I'm not sure, we don't know what the truth is, but I'm still gonna jump behind whatever I'm saying so hard that I'm willing to like attack and insult people over it, even though I just said that I'm not exactly sure what the truth is. So it's like, well, if you don't, act like it.
Yeah.
Just be open. Like, just open your mind to finding out what it is. Yeah, you might be leaning to one side more so than the other at this point because the information that you've received so far points you that way. But in any case, until you're undeniably sure, until you can vouch for it and kind of put everything you got behind it, don't do it. Just, just be open rather than certain, because you're not.
Yeah, a good term is strong beliefs loosely held. And it's like, based on what I know so far, this is where I'm sitting. But yeah, like I say, teach me something. I might learn something. I might be wrong. Be happy to be wrong. And like, is that what you're trying to show with your sort of woke guy? That he's like he's acting out of fear, so he needs to find a stake in the ground so that he can have some security, have something to hold on to, something to cling to, so that like so start of the year. Yeah, it was. No, it must have been last year. Oh, I'm confused. 1 year, COVID years. It was last year. Jesus, it's been 2 years. I was doing some coaching, and that was one of the things. You see, when you're in fear, you kind of like, it's almost like you're in a whirlwind, and you've got your sort of 4 pillars of life, and you just kind of cling to one. Like it might be, I need more money, or I need more security, I need a place to live, or I need my family, or I need my outlet of, like, say, sport or whatever it is that you do. And so you say, like, I need to do more of that, and if I do that, then I'll be happy. And it's kind of like the same thing that you can apply to when you're in a fear mentality about what's going on at the moment. Like, for example, I got the vaccine, so definitely every advice around the vaccine means that, that's the correct advice, and all these other people are just naysayers and, don't know what they're talking about, and they're stupid. And it's like, well, no, like, at the time, I took the vaccine based on what I understood. I've noticed things have changed. I noticed there's risks. I knew that there was some risks at the time, and I've got to be happy with the decision you make at the time. And if other people are on a different spectrum of how they're dealing with it, then that's cool too. But, they also have a different life. Yeah.
It's funny with vaccines. I think it's such a hot button issue right now.
God, yeah.
And, everyone just wants to jump on one side or the other. And I think that's what's hard about it. That's my main issue with the vaccine right now. Is it's not the vaccine, it's the way that the information's presented. Like studying communications, like all my professors just always kind of like rip their hair out as to why this sucks so bad.
Yeah.
It's just like, why is it that it's always something to do with, with your Christmas holidays and your business and there's this, but when it comes to, getting some information about health, go talk to someone. To who? You should be doing this. People, like, I mean, you know who, like, they'll tell you who to go to talk about condoms. They'll tell you who to talk about drugs. Why isn't there... If this is the biggest issue we have right now, why don't we have that for the vaccine? So instead of all the guessing and all the own research and all of this, why isn't there just information on that so people can finally kind of get some peace of mind from that? So rather than from politics, rather than from the media, because bottom line is getting to the point that people don't trust either of those. So we need that third source, and for some reason in this campaign we don't have that, and that's the biggest issue. And that's why people are having such polarized opinions about it. You either really trust what there is or you really don't. But you don't have that kind of middle ground that's going to be like, okay, guys, let's put the beliefs to the side and let's just focus on the science. We'll show you what it is. We'll show you what the risk is. And we'll show you why we're asking you to do this.
But I think you just brought up some points there of, like, science. It's not absolute. It is about risk ratio and risk reduction. It's not absolute. There's a guy, Jordan Rivers, on TikTok. He's trying to explain it, but he just keeps having arguments with people, and it's like, the overall fatality rate is not you as an individual. Same with when it comes to vaccine side effects. There's the overall vaccine side effects, but there's you as an individual. So, say you do have a heart condition, say you do have COPD, then what do? Because you're at great risk of, if you get COVID, that going really badly. But you're also at an increased risk of getting a vaccine. Maybe you're one of those people that the side effect happens to. What do?
Exactly. But the thing is, nobody wants to hear that from the Prime Minister.
No.
People want to hear that from a better source, from a source more appropriate for the information.
But it takes like 4 hours. Say when, so for example, some people, there's a medical doctor in the States called Peter Attia. He runs a really good podcast, and he interviews the likes of Peter Hotiers, who's infectious diseases and rare diseases person. He has worked at the CDC and things like that. And, they have to talk for 3 hours to try and explain what's going on, what all the work that's happened so far, and why they think things are happening, what's the mode of action, and why that could cause a side effect. It has to take 3 hours.
Well, for some resources behind that, into trying to compress that.
Yeah,
because you obviously have resources. You need to throw them somewhere. You're going to either throw them at the police that has to sit at the border in Auckland.
Yeah.
You got to throw them at the PPE that you provide. You got to throw this somewhere. It's gonna cost you money.
Yeah.
So if you want this to be effective, throw them there.
Yeah. So you're sort of suggesting that, like, we need some resources thrown at some bloody communications professionals.
Well, just communications professionals and people that actually have the right information on the scientific level, ones that are going to say, okay, cool, this is why we need the vaccine. Not because Auntie Cindy said, or any of that, or whatever memes are going around, but let's get to the core of this and let's explain why. So to the point where the argument is minimal. Even if you're going to come back and say, well, but what if I'm at risk of this and this? Well, yeah, okay, but either way, can you see what position you're in?
Yeah.
So at that point, it's a lot easier to make a decision than as opposed to kind of being constantly bombarded with something, about from a political level.
Yeah. And it's like I listen to Lex Friedman, fellow Russian, and he interviews people like Andrew Huberman and David Sinclair and Matthew Walker, who are like science educators. Think of Neil deGrasse Tyson. There's a couple of like physics lecturers, and I can't think of their names, who are very good at communicating science. And again, going back to what we say, where's the like infectious disease person?
Where's the Neil deGrasse Tyson of infectious diseases? And that is, who gives a damn about physics guys?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, like, it's just not a glamorous thing, but that guy managed to do it.
Yeah.
Because he could present that information well. And
yeah,
this
who gives
is
a
what
damn
we need.
about robots? Lex Friedman does, and he can talk to you about it.
Elon Musk as well, get him on Joe Rogan, suddenly you're like, oh my God, I like robots, But that's what I mean. It's just like, make sure that this is presented right. You can't underestimate the way this information is presented. You can't force feed it by political means, and that's the problem that we seem to be having with this campaign. So like that's what I mean is it's not about at this stage it's not about people's views on conspiracies and vaccines. It's just about addressing them and not ignoring them and saying that, these guys are just nuts. Can you people be serious and just take the vaccine? It's just, no, if this is a problem, address it, because it's a direct contradiction to what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
This should be your first priority.
Yeah, so, not addressing the contradictions, just belittling the contradictions, I guess.
Yeah, and trying to dismiss it as nonsense, but people are listening.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the alternative voice against what traditionally has become as something that is not actually that trustworthy, because people just don't trust the government anymore. And they have their reasons for it, because it's just a constant back and forth to kind of stay on top.
Yeah, it's politics.
Politics have always been politics, so that's what it is. There's a degree of trust.
Yeah, hard out. And it's almost like bird flu and swine flu. My younger brother got swine flu, and it was kind of like, in his case, he had to sit in his dorm room at university for a week, get over it, and then he did, and it was fine, and it was, that was a potential pandemic. Bird flu was like a potential pandemic, but so swine flu, that was like 2009. Facebook was more about like showing a good photo and saying I went out for dinner last night.
People had Bebo at the time still.
They're still rocking
MySpace,
still rocking their Bebo. Before that, it's like no internet. It would be fascinating to see like the messaging of the Korean flu. Like where was it written? Like it would have been the 6 o'clock news. Like Korean flu, do whatever it was. They probably mandated back then, and carry on. Everyone lived their life. We didn't know that old mate had jumped on the back of a truck and made it all the way to Levin. Nobody cared, those sorts of things. Whereas now, like a little thing in our pocket, you can go across Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, grab all the newspapers, grab all the news channels, grab some news from CNN, NBC, Fox. If you want to, you can get Al Jazeera, BBC, all just in your pocket, and then you can go, none of this makes any sense. It's all contradictory.
And that's why stakes are high right now. That's why you can't just do what you've always done. Your word, the government's word doesn't carry as much weight anymore, because there's a whole lot of other words fighting against you. So you actually have to make sure that the message is delivered correctly. And it's not just coming from you anymore, because everyone has the same voice just as you. Anybody can get on Facebook and be amplified to the same extent as you are. So you need to make sure that it is coming from the right place and explained in the right way. And I think this is where the ball's being dropped.
Hard out.
Yeah,
and it's like, just then it goes on there on Monday, and it's like, we're going to do the road map. And it's like, oh fuck, we heard about the road map in New South Wales and Melbourne 6 months ago, and they're still on the road and nobody knows where they're going. And then you're just like, oh, but look at the USA, like da 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 da. This state in the USA is doing this state in the US, but what about Miami? And like everyone for ages when it comes to vaccines, be like talking about Israel, and then on stuff the other day it had all the rates of vaccines, and it was like Israel was 66% and we're 64%. I was like, oh, fuck off with Israel. Like, I want to know about Portugal, who they're the one at the top. It's just like just a mess all of a sudden. You're like, oh, what you're saying does, you find yourself going, oh fuck, what you're saying doesn't even count.
Yeah, so I need to invest into actually filtering out the correct information. They say, okay, cool, if everyone's talking about Israel, can I just get you to look up a little bit and look at those guys, because they're not the guys we should be talking about. Somebody can always hijack the argument for whatever cause. And you think about Israel, and you're like Tel Aviv, city, and then you're like, what's the rest of Israel like?
there's massive numbers of COVID in Israel, but there's also a reasonable population of vaccinated people. And you're like, are they the same people? And then you go to the well, do your own research. You're like, yeah, research, and goes back to your point. Like, where's the frickin' person that communicates? Like, hey, I have done the research. Well, there probably is.
Well, doing your own research is, it's dangerous. It's dangerous, and it's also really hard unless you're actually prepared to do it. But I mean, let's face it, no one does. You spend a few minutes just you type a few keywords into Google, and that's your research. Real research takes a lot of time. There's
not that many PhDs out there.
No, there isn't. I mean, everything I write for university takes a lot of research, and that isn't even that important in comparison to what we're trying to research here.
Yeah.
This is just kind of talking about social media, how people, the trend of posting something. We're not talking about vaccines. That's going to take a lot more research.
Yeah, I always bring it up because I think it's an important thing. It's like the Dunning-Kruger effect is when you learn a little bit, you've got heaps of confidence in what you know, but when you learn a little bit more, you realize that, maybe I'm not so sure about that anymore. And then you learn a little bit more, and then you're like, oh, shit, I really don't know much at all. And then you kind of do learn a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and then you become an expert. But your confidence is never, ever as high as when you first started out learning about this topic.
And that is why, because you understand that, when you were at the tip of this iceberg and you thought you were the man because you finally saw it, and the further you went, you saw how big it was, you also realized that there may be a little bit something underneath that nobody's still seen, so you can never be too sure.
Yeah.
You'd be like, okay, this is what I know. I know a lot, but I'm never going to say that I know everything, because bottom line is it's damn near impossible to know everything about something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, hard out. Cool. What do you got? Do you have a plan now?
Oh man, I don't.
Because we were talking on the weekend, should we do a podcast? You're like, well, I plan to be back at work next week, but hey, I might still be in Tokoroa.
Yeah, no, well, that's kind of how it is now. We have to play it, bit by bit, because we have a review next Monday, and potentially next week I could be going back up. But again, even then, we still don't know, because, given the vague kind of policy of this roadmap, it kind of doesn't allow a lot of the businesses to adjust to it too well either.
Mm-hmm.
So, at the same time, we're kind of sitting around. It's like, well, okay, we're not going to call any shots because we don't know what's going to happen. There's no point in telling you that, okay, next week you're going to be at work, because we just don't know. So, yeah.
So why would the bank want you back at actually a physical work?
Yeah. In the office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it kind of like level 1, mate? You can come back?
I mean, I suppose the plan was for us to go back at level 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously observing certain protocols. But yeah, given the situation the way it is, they're kind of just thinking about, hey, you know what, even if we do go down a little bit, it may be a little while before we get people, depends on how essential your service is, because there's obviously people that, they need to be on the front line. They're like, okay, people need new cards because they just don't have cards, they've lost their card. They need somebody at the counter helping them. Whereas what I do, it can be done over a computer, and yeah, it's not absolutely necessary for me to be in the building. So we'll see what happens. I've been here since August.
Yeah.
Yeah, since I arrived on the night that the lockdown was announced.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been here since. So I'm a temporary resident of Tokoroa.
Mighty Tokoroa. How much fried chicken have you had?
Oh man, what is it? Double Happy Takeaways here.
Yeah,
that's my spot, man. They do such nice honey chicken, eh? Yeah, see, that's the small business you support. Soon as we went down to level, what was it, level 3?
Yeah.
As soon as we went down to level 3, that's the first spot I went to. Everybody was standing in those 2-kilometer lines to McDonald's and KFC. I'm like, nah, man, this is the business here.
Yeah. Now, Peterson-Burn's in a very arduous spot of being 3 doors down from Country Fried Chicken, the infamous Country Fried Chicken of Tokoroa.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you haven't bought your lunch, it's pretty tempting. And some of the roast huts, the girls, they go and grab the pork crackle, and yeah, it's a good afternoon snack.
I might need to give that a jam because I haven't tried that yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, there's a photo of Quay Cooper going around of him standing up front, and just everyone takes it. If you know, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I need to get down with that.
Yeah. I mean, so where do people find you, Alexy?
Instagram will probably be my biggest one. I mean, I try to do a bit of TikTok, but I find that platform a little bit still new to me. There's way too many trends.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to push original content because you always have to fit some trend that's going on TikTok. So Instagram will probably be my biggest one. Rolling Russia.
Yeah.
Rolling_Russia. You know what time it is. Most of the stuff that I get up to is on there. So even content that gets posted on other platforms, it'll come out on there for sure.
On Instagram.
Yeah.
You're a visual dude. Yeah. And hopefully soon enough we'll be able to see your podcast.
Yeah, definitely.
When you can get back to talking to people like this.
Yeah, man. Yeah, well, like eventually you'll find yourself up in Auckland.
Yeah,
when it's level 2.005 or whatever, whatever we're allowed to do, we'll sit down and do this again on my show.
On your terms, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, there's a couple of people in Auckland now, they're like, do you do Zoom? Or like, yeah, I used to do Zoom. Talking in person so much better. I was like, I'll optimistically wait.
Yeah, no, that was the same thing for me, man. Like I thought about doing it, over Zoom and all that, but it's not the same, the way you chop it up, it's not the same when you're kind of bouncing it back and forth. Yeah.
Hard out. So how I finish a podcast, Alexy, is like, what keeps you in flow? Is there like a mantra or a way you think or a way you live your life that when things are going right, you probably are implementing that or that's coming about?
For me, it's just keeping an open mind. I found that over this COVID period, especially, I've transitioned from being this man with a plan all the time, because that was me. Like I always like to plan, 100 steps ahead and know what's in front of me. But COVID has shown us that that's not going to be the case. They kind of, it opened my mind a little bit to a lot of different ideas. So, as much as I'm trying to present content, I'm out here absorbing, I'm out here learning, and I want to share that. That's the main reason behind, what I do on Instagram, what I want to do with my podcast. It's not just about me telling you something. It's me sharing something, and it's not the same thing.
Yeah, bro, that's awesome. Thanks very much, mate.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks for coming around. Wicked.
Awesome.